If anyone present objects to this union, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. The officiant had barely finished speaking these words when a deathly quiet invaded the place. "I object," exclaimed Michael Thompson, only 8 years old, from the center of the altar with his face red and firmly gripping his cell phone. The entire hall went motionless. The music stopped immediately. The guests remained stupefied, some allowed their glasses to fall. The atmosphere of celebration vanished instantly. "Dad, if I don't speak now, no one will ever pay attention to me," declared Michael with his whole body trembling, though maintaining a firm and resolute voice. This was the air of the magnate. By interrupting the most talked-about ceremony in Chicago before everyone, he exposed what none wanted to know. The bride, Victoria Matthews, pretended the situation was nothing more than mischief. She struggled to suppress a nervous smile, however her expression revealed anger. The father, Richard Thompson, looked bewildered, unable to determine where to look. The venue, full of wealthy and influential personalities, transformed into the scene of a television drama in real time. "These are not matters for children," she declared, "it's exactly what she makes me feel." Michael exhaled deeply while fixing his gaze on the bride without showing hesitation, as if he could no longer contain his feelings or bear the humiliation. The guests moved with evident discomfort, documenting each moment with their mobile devices. The elegance of the flowers and lighting suddenly became insignificant before the courage of a child tired of tolerating suffering in complete silence. No one would have anticipated that such a refined ceremony would become such a scandal. Michael raised his mobile device and with determination proclaimed, "I have evidence of everything." At that precise moment, the quiet intensified even more. The minister was perplexed, not knowing the appropriate way to react. All eyes focused on the young boy who seemed to expand in that place, challenging each person present. And if you ever thought you had witnessed all kinds of drama in soap operas, wait and see what this child is about to reveal. Subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, comment, share, because this story will transform your perspective and show you the true meaning of authentic courage. Are you ready to discover the reality of the altar? The altar, which previously served as a stage for dreams and vows, transformed into a battlefield just when Michael emitted that unexpected cry. The child was trembling completely, but kept his cell phone gripped tightly. The minister, who had never experienced such a situation, acquired a waxy pallor. The attendees, usually accustomed to finding amusement in everything, now only looked at him as if they had seen a ghost. No one knew how to respond. Victoria, the bride, even tried to appear normal, but her expression betrayed the poison that consumed her. And Richard, the multimillionaire father, seemed to have received an impact to his chest. It was possible to observe the confusion on his face, deciding between embracing his son or apologizing to all those present. After remaining hidden for so long, the truth chose to manifest itself precisely there before the altar at the most decisive moment of a grand event, with a luxurious celebration that had consumed a fortune and promised to become the high point of the year. Nevertheless, everything became the backdrop of a drama so intense that not even a novelist would have dared conceive. Expensive flowers, red carpet, crystal decorations. All of that became insignificant before Michael's voice, who finally broke the silence of someone who had always yearned to be heard. "Dad, I speak now because no one has ever truly listened to me. Today is my only chance," expressed the child. Despite the trembling that overcame him, he maintained a firm gaze, challenging each adult present with an expression that seemed to communicate, "Now I am the one who has the floor." The courage he radiated was incalculable. It represented the final attempt of someone who had already endured excessive humiliation in silence, carrying the pain in his heart while everyone pretended not to see it. The silence grew unbearable, so heavy that you could feel hearts pounding in throats. The orchestra musicians exchanged looks full of anxiety, unable to find courage even to attempt a simple chord. Some began to perspire coldly, others only focused on recording to publish later on social media, but at that moment no one wanted to miss any detail. It was as if everyone already knew that this moment would provoke a radical change in multiple lives. Michael, gripping the phone with all his strength, looked fragile, but at that moment represented the only truly mature one among that crowd that had never found the courage to speak out. Victoria sketched that forced smile, typical of someone trying to appear innocent, but the facade had already deteriorated. It's simply adolescent nerves, after all. Who hasn't experienced that? She tried to disguise, diverting her gaze toward her mother, who only crossed her arms with a bored attitude. But Michael didn't care at all. He fixed his gaze on his father and repeated loudly so there would be no doubt, It's not about nervousness, Dad, it's precisely what she makes me experience. Only I understand what I feel. The phrase crossed the hall like a sharp blade. The audience divided between observing the child and looking at the phone, waiting for the bomb to finally explode. It was then that many understood the situation was serious. The minister breathed deeply, trying to regain control, but it was already too late. The ritual had transformed into total chaos. The phrase, "Speak now or forever hold your peace," had never seemed so pertinent as at that precise moment. Michael's gaze transmitted an intensity that, along with desperation, also carried the strength of someone who no longer tolerated invisibility. Richard, the father, found himself in the middle of a dilemma, trapped between his son and the wife he thought he knew. He experienced the weight of years of suffocation, of cold meals and silent nights. The opulence became insignificant before the sincere cry of a son who only sought justice. Pretending that nothing was wrong became impossible. The guests stirred restlessly in their seats. Some experiencing shame, others with the feeling that something much more serious than simple salon rumors was brewing there. The situation became unbearable. The tension in the air was suffocating. Wealthy people are fascinated by others' scandals, but detest when filth manifests in their own lives. The wedding, which previously represented a source of pride, became a shameful spectacle, and Michael, still being so young, kept everyone under his control, prepared to demonstrate the true meaning of courage. "I only want everyone to hear what I have to say. It's not fair that I go through all this in complete silence," he declared without showing doubt. At the other end of the altar, the nanny Sarah observed the entire situation from a distance, struggling to contain her tears. She had always had the intuition of what was happening, but had never found the courage to confront her employer. Now, however, she recognized in the child the audacity that she had lacked. "Speak, Michael, don't let anyone silence you," she thought with whispered hope. And in that silence she felt she was about to witness how the child would change the course of his own story and possibly that of the entire family. The celebration, which should have represented the happiest day in Victoria's life, had become her worst nightmare. The future appeared uncertain, but everyone experienced the sensation that the marriage would never recover its previous form. The air was charged with the weight of scandal. The ceremony had already concluded. The cell phones continued recording, the aunts stirred nervously, the uncles tried to avoid glances. All the people present knew that from that moment nothing more would remain hidden. "I have proof, Dad. I have absolutely everything recorded on my phone. I haven't invented anything, I only recorded so that no one could accuse me of being a liar," declared Michael, gripping the device with such intensity that it seemed to have become an extension of himself. The gesture demonstrated that the child was more prepared to face the world than many of the adults present. And at that instant the truth manifested itself. It was the voice of exhaustion from those who grew tired of being humiliated and, tired of waiting for justice, decided to seek it on their own account. The poor minister remained bewildered, debating between continuing with the ceremony or simply abandoning the place. The venue had become a judicial court. Each gaze functioned as a verdict. No one could identify who was the villain, who the victim, who simply a secondary actor. What was certain was that before that altar everyone carried some responsibility, some for what they did, others for what they kept silent. However, only Michael found the courage to raise his voice. The altar that had been prepared for a happy ending transformed into a theater of redemption, of the courage of a child who had reached the limit of tolerating invisibility in his own home. Victoria, facing collapse, tried to justify herself. The nanny's fault. She manipulated him, she screamed almost between sobs of rage. But no one gave her credit. Everyone turned toward Michael awaiting more revelations, and he did not disappoint them. "No one asked me to record. I did it because no one trusts my words. Had I remained silent, I would have continued suffering in solitude, but today I have chosen not to keep quiet," he declared emotionally while tears slid down his face. With each declaration, the child's courage grew and the adult's fear also intensified. Everyone perceived the blow. The altar that was to symbolize love and union transformed into the theater of people's justice. From that moment, all attendees understood that no fortune can defend you from the truth. "This is the day when everyone must hear what they never wanted to hear," proclaimed Michael, fixing his gaze on the crowd without looking away. It was the beginning of a rebellion within the family itself, and no one could calculate how far it would go. A conviction floated in the air. No one would leave there being the same person who had arrived. The ceremony that became the scandal of the year perpetuated Michael, a name that would never fall into oblivion. The quiet that was established was different. This time it was not the silence of fear, but the silence of admiration. The child had achieved something that many adults never accomplish, the courage to face the entire world if necessary. And there, before everyone, Michael showed that dignity has no price, that courage is not for sale, and that truth, sooner or later, always triumphs. The story of that wedding had changed definitively, but what no one anticipated was what would happen afterward. In contrast to the joy that dominated outside, the atmosphere backstage was charged. Victoria Matthews adjusted her veil before the mirror, but her face overflowed with arrogance. Michael, already dressed in his children's outfit, was summoned by the bride, who took the opportunity to transmit a message impregnated with malice. "Listen, boy, today you will show a smile before the altar, understand? If you think of crying, you'll go straight to your room without tasting food. Is that clear?" she murmured while gripping his arm firmly. The intimidation was whispered, but its effect was devastating. Michael directed his gaze downward, struggling to suppress his tears, while Victoria smoothed her dress with nails as sharp as the phrases she had just uttered. The tension in the atmosphere could be felt. Carol, the bride's mother, watched with crossed arms and the expression of someone who considers humiliation the best lesson. "It's necessary to be severe, my daughter. Children only understand this way," she sentenced without showing any regret. With each merciless expression, Michael's heart contracted, keeping his pocket sealed. With resolution he leaned down, protecting the only refuge he had, the cell phone. There lay the evidence of everything, but the panic was so overwhelming that it was hard to breathe. Sarah, the caregiver, noticed the child's strange behavior and tried to approach. She understood what was happening behind the scenes, but had not yet shown the boldness to confront her employer. The only possibility was to wait in silence. The fragrance of refined perfume combined with hairspray made the air even more unbreathable. Victoria approached Michael's ear with a voice cold as ice. "If you say a word, I will destroy you. You carry your phone in your hand and persist in affirming that everything is false. Do you get it? Don't challenge me on this day." The boy felt how his palms became moist, but gripped the device more firmly. He knew it represented the only occasion to expose the truth, but the fear of punishment was enormous. Victoria returned to the mirror as if nothing had happened, touching up her lipstick and smiling at her image. Only she knew the reality that was hidden behind that supposedly cheerful smile. The preparations for the ceremony had become true mental torture. Michael examined the environment looking for a familiar face, but only found individuals absorbed in their own reflections, incapable of detecting a child's suffering. Victoria, always haughty, distributed instructions incessantly. "Stay still, don't touch anything. Don't ruin my dress." And the child, insignificant in the midst of such opulence, experienced how solitude suffocated him even more. The resonance of heels, the glitter of jewels, and the murmurs of envy transformed the dressing room into a place where neither affection nor understanding could fit. Terror and malice dominated that space, displaying total control. Faced with such a fictitious panorama, those outside were completely unaware of what was happening. The nanny Sarah, despite her fear, observed every gesture, trying to register in her mind the details of that horror show. At one moment she crouched down and whispered in Michael's ear, "If the pain is too intense, remember that truth always wins. Don't let that phone slip from your hands." The child tried to show a smile, but only managed to nod affirmatively. That was the only spark of hope in the midst of so much oppression. The cell phone, for Michael, that device represented the key to the freedom he wanted to achieve. The official photograph that would later illustrate a moment of pure distinction with a perfect bride, a radiant godmother, and an impeccably dressed child, concealed a reality. What no one suspected was that while everyone prepared to smile for the family album, Michael was preparing to face the challenges of the world. Victoria, obsessed with her image, did not suspect that the poison she spilled was being recorded for everyone to hear. Each expression, each intimidation, each gesture of contempt remained archived in the child's memory, and now also in the recording made by the device hidden in the suit pocket. The threats continued until the final moment. "Today you're not going to ruin my day, and don't you dare make unpleasant faces in the photographs. Do you understand? And if you shed a tear, you know the consequences." Victoria pressed Michael's shoulder, reaffirming her position as the one who established the rules. Michael's heart pounded intensely, as if wanting to escape through his mouth. Fear could be touched, but the longing for justice was even more intense. He understood that no one in that place could help him if things got complicated. That's why he chose to risk everything with his own courage. It was betting everything. And this time silence would not win. In the dressing room, each of Victoria's expressions functioned like an invisible dagger that shattered Michael's illusions. She held nothing back and snapped at him, "Stop mentioning your deceased mother, boy. Here I am the one with authority. If you part your lips, you'll find out." Anger seized the boy's chest, but he restrained himself. He could not show fragility. He suppressed his tears, swallowed his sorrow and swore to himself that no one would silence his voice again. And inside him began to germinate a new courage different from anything he had experienced before. Something was transforming inside him, and this time it would be definitive. Carol, from her pedestal of arrogance, still tried to give her opinion. "Children must learn to follow orders, Victoria. Don't go soft. That's how you educate." But no one there knew the true ordeal that Michael was living. Only he knew the taste of loneliness, the terror of each nightfall, the longing to vanish so as not to suffer anymore. The cell phone constituted his last hope, the only defense against so much evil. With each intimidation, the desire to expose everything to the world intensified. And without realizing it, the child began to convert fear into strength, sorrow into courage. It was simply a matter of time until reality came to light. Outside, the musicians practiced, the lighting was activated, the celebration went on, while no one suspected the storm building in the dressing room. But there, distant from prying eyes, Michael already knew clearly what he had to do. It was now or never. And with his soul in suspense, he promised himself that he would never become a victim again. The makeup, the lipstick and Victoria's malice would be defeated by the voice of a child tired of suffering. And in this way, while the world posed for pictures, Michael prepared the cry that would modify the destiny of that ceremony and of an entire lineage. The dense silence of the venue was definitively broken when Michael fixed his gaze on his father's eyes and with a decisive gesture pressed the play button on the phone. "I recorded it because no one gave me credit," he spoke with a broken voice, but full of courage. The sound echoed through the speakers. "You are a nuisance. Stay in the room and don't interfere with the photographs," Victoria said, cold as ice, showing no compassion. The effect was instantaneous. Everyone watched terrified, as if they didn't understand what they were perceiving. The word "dead" resonated with cruelty. "Stop worshipping that deceased woman. Here I am the one who rules." The refined hall shuddered and the velvet of the seats seemed to lose their distinction. There were attendees who placed their glasses on the floor, others brought their hands to their mouths in shock. Incredulous, a murmured "My God" spread throughout the hall, but it was widespread. Richard experienced how the ground vanished under his feet. His face paled and he no longer knew where to turn. Victoria struggled to pretend, but the expression of anger did not fade. She understood that from that moment nothing more would remain hidden. The bride's mother, Carol, tried to shelter her daughter with the same worn-out justification. Economic setup, fiction. However, her words found no echo. The atmosphere was impregnated with collective embarrassment, as if all the attendees had been accomplices in the simulation that now collapsed before everyone's sight. The sounds of the hall faded. Even the orchestra, which was accustomed to participating in everything, now remained inactive, incapable of playing a single melody. The minister, bewildered, closed the book while the microphone was concealed behind the volume, as if hiding it could make it disappear. Michael remained firm, despite his trembling limbs. He knew it was the crucial moment, the only possibility. "She constantly ranted about my mother, about my father, incessantly." And then he played another recording. In it echoed the expression, "Here the deceased has no authority." This time the blow was experienced by everyone present in the venue. Wealthy individuals, influential people, all in shock. It was a harsh reality, complicated to assimilate, but irrefutable. The responses were diverse. No one knew who to look at, whether at Victoria, at Richard, or at the child. Some simply remained static. The expectation for the next audio was like watching the greatest family drama in the Thompson history. Victoria gripped the bouquet with such intensity that it threatened to destroy the flowers. Carol sighed, searching for phrases to defend her daughter, but nothing occurred to her. The crowd, which previously only cared about ostentation, now wanted to know how far that scandal would extend. The bride, who had always fantasized about that day, watched how her palace crumbled gradually, fragment by fragment, expression by expression, broadcast aloud for everyone to hear. Initially Michael felt diminutive, but upon contemplating the attendees' reaction he realized that his courage surpassed his fear. "No one had faith in me, that's why I recorded everything," he declared with a voice almost inaudible, but loaded with honesty. The audio echoed, each expression constituted a wound, each word tore a piece of the family appearance. For the first time the child experienced the sensation of triumph. His father's countenance, previously always peaceful, now showed a combination of guilt and amazement. The falsehood had been discovered, exhibited, without restraint, inevitable. It was an irreversible reality. No matter how much effort they put in. The attendees who until then devoted themselves solely to conversing about fortune and exhibition, now only dared to comment about the courage of a child who had exposed reality without hesitation regardless of the price. It was as if opulence had lost its meaning before authentic suffering, public humiliation, the cry for help that had been hidden for years in the corners of the home. Victoria, who always had an answer for everything, now only defended herself with lamentations. It's not true. All children fantasize, that's common knowledge. But the audio persisted, demolishing any possibility of rejection. The firmness of truth surpassed any feeble pretext. The atmosphere became thick. People retreated restlessly in their seats, some embarrassed, others perceiving that they were witnessing something too transcendent to dismiss. The father, undecided, found himself between canceling the marriage or starting a group therapy session. Sarah, the caregiver, cried silently, experiencing relief at finally seeing the child express everything she herself had feared to manifest. The audio revealed not only the stepmother's hatred, who had taken advantage of Michael's mother's death, but also the routine of hidden mistreatment within the mansion that had become undeniable. Pretending that nothing had happened was impossible. A heavy and total quiet was established. Not even the drones filming from above could cover up the truth. Victoria's tears flowed. The hall, previously a stage for exhibition, transformed into a public tribunal and the people into judges. Michael, despite his trembling, remained firm. I only wanted someone to pay attention to me. Now finally everyone is listening. His courage transformed into inspiration for many of the attendees who had never had a voice. The child showed that fortune, appearance, and social status cannot silence a truth that has been in his chest for so long. The audio became the new melody of that celebration, changing the course of history. Carol continued trying to defend her daughter, but with each expression it became more evident that no one wanted to hear justifications. People longed for justice. They wanted to know the limit of that child's courage. The tension was so palpable that it seemed feasible to cut it with a knife. The children who witnessed what happened were terrified, but with their eyes fixed on Michael's strength. Learning from the circumstance. No one should remain silent before injustice. Truth, although painful, fosters development and liberation. And that day Michael transformed into someone exceptional. Victoria, desperate, tried to contain herself, but it was already too late. It was suffocating even to breathe. The guests experienced viscerally what it means to watch luxury collapse before a child's truth. Richard, the father, finally admitted his absence, how much he had dismissed his own son's suffering, and now, before everyone, denial had become impossible. The place destined for celebrating a union transformed into the scene of a necessary separation. Michael, with the phone still in his hand, looked at his father and expressed, "I only wanted to be truly happy." The hall remained silent, as if time had stopped. The child, solitary but brave, changed the destiny of that family, that marriage, and an entire story. But there no one knew what else Michael kept on his phone. The play button had been pressed, but what would come afterward could destroy much more than a marriage. It could end years of falsehoods and eternally transform the meaning of family. In that atmosphere, everyone held their breath, awaiting the outcome of that drama that no one could dismiss anymore. The hall was still stunned when Michael calmly played another audio. The recording was even more forceful. "If you part your lips, I'll destroy this phone." Victoria's voice resonated through the speakers, loaded with fury and without any remorse. The attendees remained motionless, perceiving each expression as an open wound. The disdain of the message was irrefutable. Go to the dark bedroom and learn to be silent. Each sound represented an unbearable weight. The echo of silence spread, generating embarrassment among adults and children. "You have cried, do without food," dictated the stepmother's cruel voice without showing mercy, unaware that there only existed a child longing for affection. Even the subtle murmur of crystals was extinguished. No one else could determine how to respond. While those present tried to assimilate such barbarism, Michael kept his gaze fixed on the floor, evoking all the nights where he had found himself alone, before the darkness of the bathroom, consumed by awaiting the light, counting each moment to escape the torment of isolation. The residence, despite all its magnificence, hid behind the sumptuous walls the torment of a childhood marked by affliction. The small, vulnerable one had learned to survive among abundance, tracking crumbs of affection, like one who clings to survival. And then the horror of each punishment, the sound of the key turning in the lock, the icy quiet of abandonment resonated for everyone. It was not merely a juvenile crisis, it represented genuine abuse. The recordings intensified, each one more merciless than the previous one. "Stop drawing that deceased saint." And Victoria's voice could be heard destroying the paper and simultaneously the child's soul. In the background, the crash, the crackle of tearing paper merged with Michael's quiet moan, who settled for sighing softly to avoid more beatings. Each reminiscence of his mother was treated with contempt, as if it were garbage. And he, immersed in that anguish, learned to stifle the word mother, because mentioning her meant opening bleeding wounds. The spectators, bewildered, understood at that moment that the cruelty was not an isolated event, but a routine, a procedure, a law in that child's existence. With each new recording, the sensation of discomfort increased. "If you protest before your father, I will declare it's a trick." Victoria expressed herself with that icy voice of someone who has never cared. The gazes of the attendees began to feel overwhelmed. It was no longer simply a wedding quarrel, it constituted the denunciation of a crime. It was a plea for help live. The expressions of annoyance and mockery vanished. Now only shame and indignation persisted. No one expected to witness the mask of the perfect family collapse in such a way without filter before the entire world. It was impossible not to put oneself in the child's place. Impossible not to feel anger, not to desire justice. The media that had been summoned to document the celebration of the year now recorded the disgrace of the century. Patricia Miller, the most prestigious journalist in the city, no longer discerned whether she was filming or trying to console Michael. The mobile device, emblem of modernity, transformed into the child's only weapon to face years of oppression. The clarity of the audio was indisputable, without editing, without cuts, without margin for pretexts. The pattern of cruelty was evident. It was not an individual incident, but an entire life marked by humiliation. And the spectators, previously accustomed to disengaging, now found themselves forced to confront reality. Richard Thompson, the father, seemed to crumble with each word uttered. He finally understood that the dimension of the void where he had placed his own son was not only guilt, but a burden of regret, impotence, and the perception of being an involuntary accomplice. His gaze no longer pursued excuses, but forgiveness, the search for redemption. However, at that altar only Michael possessed the faculty to forgive. The child, with his voice still wavering, showed that adults do not always possess all the solutions and that frequently those who require protection are precisely those who most appear not to need it. The tribunal atmosphere intensified. All the adults present in the venue felt under a censorious gaze. Not only for their actions, but also for everything they failed to do during all those years. The lesson was categorical. Often, the greatest crime lies in the silence of those who observe but do not intervene. The evidence of evil was so patent that no one else could feign ignorance. "Manipulation is a crime," Victoria vociferated, struggling to control her voice. But it was already too late. Those present had already determined their stance, and deep down everyone knew that it was not only about a marriage that was disintegrating, but about an original story that was being recovered. Most impressive was the verification that all the suffering was premeditated, applied with method and systematicity. There were no outbursts of fury, only methodical cruelty. The child learned to distrust, not to ask for help, to become invisible even in his own home. With each new audio, those present experienced embarrassment for having repeatedly dismissed someone's suffering. Michael demonstrated with courage that the authentic value of existence lies in the freedom to be heard, in the possibility of being loved, and in the right to simply be a child. The celebratory atmosphere transformed into a funeral ceremony for illusions. Opulence lost its brilliance, flowers lost their freshness. The red carpet became a path of torment. At the altar, Michael demonstrated to everyone that dignity transcends social stratifications, that consideration is not obtained with money, that authentic happiness is not built on others' pain. Silence was now equivalent to respect, no longer indifference. And in that saturated atmosphere, everyone awaited the child's next action, who with a mobile device in his hand had already definitively rewritten the course of his own story. And so, with tears streaming down the observer's face, the world brutally witnessed the scheme of evil that can be hidden even in the most pristine, most desirable, most admired homes. But there a conviction was established: truth would never again be silenced. Michael transcended his condition as a child, becoming an emblem of resistance, voice of those who were always oppressed, hope of justice for those who never found the courage to express themselves, and what was glimpsed on the horizon was uncertain. But everyone perceived that the transformation had barely begun. The venue was already tumultuous when Michael chose to go further. He inhaled deeply, wiped his face, extended his hand backward, and with courage decided to express everything there, without any filter, without editing, only with the tremulous voice of someone who no longer tolerated carrying suffering in silence. Now I will proceed to relate everything from my perspective, without recording, just me and you. The spectators fell silent. The child seemed to grow taller at the altar while all the adults present felt ashamed. She confined me in the dark bathroom, declaring that light would be a reward for children who behaved correctly. I remained there counting to 100, terrified by the darkness itself. There were days when I cried with such vehemence that I didn't even notice the passage of time. I spent the night sleepless, only perceiving the laughter from the celebration downstairs. The sensation of shock was widespread. No one could conceive that behind all that ostentation hid a cosmos of childhood horror. She took away my dinner when, dominated by longing for my mother, I burst into tears. She maintained that I ruined the photographs with my appearance. I slept with an empty stomach, hearing the tinkling of utensils downstairs, and only longed to disappear. Those present swallowed in silence, each one evoking a childhood, a terror, a pain. The empathy was such that the weight of those expressions could be felt in the atmosphere. Richard's face, the father, was completely distraught, his gaze lost, like someone who finally realized he had been blind inside his own home. Michael continued without self-pity. She pinched me every time I said, "Mom," near my father. She declared that here the deceased did not govern. I learned to swallow words. I silenced my nostalgia. I hid everything. She destroyed my drawings of my mother. She threw away the only picture I kept. I searched through the garbage, found nothing. That hurt more than any punishment. The silence was total. Victoria began to lose her rigid composure. She trembled, scrutinized around her looking for help, but no one dared to intervene. It was impossible to look away from the child, impossible not to perceive each expression as an impact. There was one occasion when I had fever. She declared it was theater to capture attention. She confined me alone, with terror, with no one. I hugged my pillow pretending it was my mother's embrace. It was there where I learned not to ask anyone for help. If I spoke, she threatened to break my phone. She said it was false because I was a child. Those present cried quietly. The ladies with expensive dresses, the gentlemen with suits, all with reddened eyes, without energy to contemplate their own reflection. The child, small amid the luxury, now stood tall in the face of truth. Michael did not stop. I recorded everything because I knew no one would give me credit. I recorded it because I feared forgetting how much it hurt. I recorded it to have courage to never be silent again. She always said that if I told, she would brand me a liar, that no one would believe a boy like me. But I got tired of hiding it. I got tired of being a victim. I only want the whole world to hear it. I don't want a stepmother who detests me and detests my mother. I only want to live in peace. The venue became even denser. Fear changed sides. Now it belonged to the adults, not the child. Victoria exploded. Lies. Children exaggerate. Everyone knows that. That nanny has poisoned him against me. But no one paid her attention. Sarah, from the distance, shook her head, knowing that truth had finally triumphed over fear. Those present witnessed there the metamorphosis of a humiliated child into the protagonist of his own narrative. There was no longer any return. Each expression uttered was a door that closed the past of torment and opened the path toward justice and hope. Michael's countenance, soaked in tears, reflected a victory obtained with effort, and that showed itself legitimate. The media cameras recorded every detail. The whole country would know the truth about what really happened behind opulence. I will never be silent again. If I must fight alone, I will fight, but I will never allow someone to humiliate me this way again. Michael made clear to everyone that no one possesses the capacity to discourage a child who finds the strength to express truth. The scene transformed into a tribunal, but the judgment was not his, it was of all those who allowed evil to perpetuate in silence. The firmness of the declaration was so intense that even those who did not know Michael felt part of the suffering. He only wanted to play, to be a child, to remember his mother without fear. He longed for his father to have seen him. He longed for someone to have cared about his well-being. The honesty tore the hearts of the adults present. The exit from the hall would not be the same as the entrance. Pride collapsed. The legacy that remained was the certainty that no pain, however intense, can be silenced forever, however powerful the lie. Deep down, that testimony served to awaken not only that family, but many people who believed themselves immune to others' pain. It was inevitable to reflect how many Michaels exist out there hiding their pain so as not to cause problems, swallowing humiliation so as not to be rejected. There before everyone he demonstrated that true courage does not lie in shouting louder, but in resisting in silence to the limit of resistance. Then he exploded in words to transform everything instantly. But even after expressing himself completely, Michael felt that the battle had not concluded. He looked at his father, looked at the altar and understood that what awaited him could be even more challenging, but this time he would no longer be alone. The child who had always been silenced was now heard by everyone. And the next challenge would be to demonstrate definitively that truth always finds a way, even in environments where privilege, money and facade are the only recognized values. The atmosphere in the hall already resembled that of a tribunal when attorney Dr. Alexander Green, summoned urgently, arrived with the posture of someone who was not there by chance. With attentive eyes and briefcase in hand, he approached Michael, requested the phone and before everyone activated airplane mode, showed the automatic backup copies and opened the audio dates. "Let's examine if everything matches," he affirmed with conviction, without beating around the bush, while a crowd approached to observe every detail. The suspense was palpable. Technology was about to confirm what the heart already intuited. Each audio file has date, time, and place. All information coincides with the usual routine. "It's impossible to edit without leaving traces," said the attorney, showing the screen to Richard, the father, who was already sobbing. The magnitude of that moment was justice applied in real time. No one else could doubt the recordings. Dr. Green then showed the cloud records, presented the metadata and demonstrated that no audio had been altered. "Here is the geolocation, here is the time. Everything coincides with the account. Not even someone with experience could create such a perfect setup," he concluded. The crowd murmured. Some with their gaze fixed on Victoria, with completely pale face, desperately searched for an error, any detail, a flaw, but found nothing. The attorney, with his impeccable performance, had consolidated the situation. Michael's courage had become something concrete, irrefutable proof. The atmosphere of the hall transformed into a courtroom. The aunts, who before only dedicated themselves to gossiping, now moved with the seriousness of justice. The uncles, previously worried only about Sunday barbecue, looked at the child with admiration. The situation no longer reduced to a simple family drama. It was a serious case that required police intervention, child protective services and a psychologist. Michael, with sweaty hands, observed everything without understanding how so many influential people had never noticed what he had lived. The child, previously silent, was now heard even by those who never wanted to listen to him. It was the beginning of a transformation that no one could stop anymore. The attorney also demonstrated that the phone had never left the house during the days of the recordings. "Look, the Wi-Fi is the same as the properties. The location history doesn't lie. The child recorded every word while he was locked up, while he was humiliated. Technology is the irrefutable proof that no one can silence him." Carol, the bride's mother, tried to intervene arguing it was an exaggeration, but the crowd's pressure was uncontrollable. The truth, now undeniable, was marked, recorded, digitized, ready to destroy any falsehood. The event's glamour became a scene for true justice, without detours, without filters, without masks. With each confirmation, Victoria's expression crumbled. She tried to cry, feign the victim role, but failed to convince anyone. The whole city followed in real time the fall of the cruel stepmother, this time without a predetermined script, without possibility of escape. "There is no escape," concluded Dr. Green. "The recordings match perfectly with the child's statements. The schedules coincide with the security gate records. Even the battery consumption confirms the recording time." It was as if every aspect of the child's life was being reconstructed before their eyes piece by piece. Injustice became an unquestionable fact demonstrated by technical evidence. The crowd in silence recognized the weight of each tear shed until then. Patricia, the journalist, recorded everything with attention. The country was going to experience not only the drama, but also the practical experience, the science, the method. Denial was no longer possible, only confrontation remained. The altar, previously a symbol of union, now represented courage, justice. A child who wrote his story challenging monsters with only a cell phone and a truth kept in his heart. Courage is also intelligence, Sarah whispered to Michael, squeezing his hand. And his cunning transformed into justice for many children who had already suffered the same. The child, looking at her, smiled genuinely for the first time. The tense atmosphere of the trial was moved by a moment of true emotion. Richard, the father, embraced him. The son without shame, asking for forgiveness in silence. People applauded, many standing, without completely understanding the reason. They only perceived that something great was brewing there, much more than a cancelled wedding. It was a historic moment, a point of no return. The family would never return to being the same. And most importantly, Michael would never be invisible again. A child's honor became news, example, hope for those who still suffer in silence. Victoria, defeated, was left speechless. The defense attempts vanished before the force of truth. She only sought order, lamented, but no one listened to her. The altar, now a place of learned lessons, witnessed justice made with courage and bravery, as evidence changed the course of destinies. The crowd felt the weight of the decision. Now only waiting for the next actions remained. What would come after that moment was uncertain, but everyone was alert. The days of silence had ended. The minister closed the ceremony book. The wedding had concluded, but a new phase was about to begin. With everyone watching, a family was forced to rise. Based on reality and no longer on appearances, the child, previously humiliated, transformed into a symbol of triumph. No one left that place without thinking about the value of justice, courage, and true love. The most anticipated event of the year became the beginning of a quiet but intense revolution, capable of inspiring the entire nation. The crowd left the hall changed. From that moment, it was no longer just about money, name, or fame, but about dignity, respect, and humanity. Michael, the child who showed courage in facing all challenges, demonstrated that truth, at the moment of truth, even the most luxurious palaces, the most secluded residences, and the most carefully guarded stories transform. The lesson was learned, and no one will ever forget that day. The atmosphere was already chaotic, but no one imagined what would happen next. Cornered, without escape, Victoria completely lost control. She could no longer pretend to be a saint or a victim. Suddenly, with a voice full of fury, she exploded. "I deceived this child for the agreement, understand? No one here needs a spoiled baby in this house. We must leave behind this dead woman that everyone worships." The impact was like a bomb in the heart of the sacred place. People were stunned, not knowing how to react. Even the children fell silent, stopping crying to pay attention. The word agreement floated in the air, heavy as a sentence everyone wanted to understand. Richard Thompson's gaze changed instantly. There was no longer guilt or fear in his eyes. It was the look of someone awakening from a nightmare. He looked at his fiancée and with a cold voice, asked, "What is this agreement, Victoria?" The silence of the hall was so strong that the sound of accelerated heartbeats could be heard in the air. Victoria stammered, trying to escape, but the truth had been liberated. "The prenuptial, Richard, you know it very well," she murmured with a strong voice so everyone could hear her. The murmur about luxury became uproar, with family secrets, hidden contracts, money, power, and betrayal spreading. Carol, the bride's mother, ran toward her daughter, trying to control the chaos. "She's just nervous, folks. All weddings have their moments of joy and sadness, right?" But no one ever believed it. The crowd was fed up with lies, appearances, and empty excuses. Their reality was direct and crude. Victoria never felt affection for Michael. She accepted the boy only out of obligation, for economic reasons, out of interest. The dream of a happy family completely collapsed. The mask fell, and what was revealed underneath was more terrible than anyone imagined. The minister closed the book slowly, as if recognizing that this marriage was already dead, even before being celebrated. He fixed his gaze on Michael, then on Richard, and understood it. In that place no blessing remained, only teaching. A climate of mourning floated in the air. The audience, who previously wanted photos with the bride, now only sought to get away. Sarah, the nanny, carried the child in her arms, offering him total protection. She understood that at that moment Michael needed comfort, to feel that he was no longer alone in the world. The child's tears now showed relief and no longer the terror that consumed him. Andrew Carter, Richard's advisor, hurried to try to control the situation, but it was a lost battle. No press release could erase what had happened. The scandal had already spread. The damage was irreparable. The whole city knew that behind the white veil filth was revealed, marking the end of a fairy tale and the beginning of a cruder, more challenging story, closer to reality. Victoria's confession showed the most corrupt face of the elite. Marriages of convenience, the abandonment of an innocent child and gratuitous hatred directed at a mother, even after her death, who could no longer defend herself. Michael felt the relief of liberation. Finally, he no longer had to invent excuses, hide his pain, pretend everything was fine. The scandal dominated headlines, became a topic of conversation in bars and a warning for all those who believed money solved everything. The child breathed deeply, dried his tears and saw in his father's gaze a silent commitment. From that moment, he would never allow his son to go through such an experience again. Victoria, defeated, could not look at anyone, not even at herself. The altar became a battlefield and the floor filled with never-revealed truths. The guests, now only witnesses to a predicted tragedy, thought about their own decisions, their own silences. It was not possible to leave there without rethinking the concept of family, love and responsibility. Victoria, accustomed to having answers for everything, this time remained silent. The poison of her words lost their effect before the exposed reality. The attorney, attentive, already organized the protocol for protective measures, separation and custody request. What had occurred had defined name, date and time, and no one else could ignore the truth. The uncensored media followed every tear of Michael's, every failed attempt at defense by his fiancée. It was the mask of hypocrisy falling piece by piece before everyone. The agreement was ending and freedom was beginning. On that occasion, before everyone, Richard Thompson finally understood the cost of his silence. He looked at Michael and recognized for the first time the son he had almost lost forever. At that moment he swore that nothing and no one would take away his opportunity to rebuild his family. This time with honesty, respect, and genuine love. The audience applauded standing up, feeling that this child's story touched the story of many who had already kept silent for a long time. However, no one could imagine that although the ending still held surprises, the scandal had come to light, the confession had been made, but Michael's destiny was only now beginning to unfold. Deep down, everyone there wished that life would give him the justice and love he had always deserved, without ties, without manipulations, without poison. The atmosphere in the hall, until then charged with tension like a judgment arena, intensified when Richard Thompson finally spoke. His voice, however, did not carry the weight of doubt or fear. "This is over." It was just one phrase, but it sounded with more force than any speech. "Please, more than any promise of eternal love," Victoria begged. She tried to grab his arm desperately, murmuring, "Consider the press, consider everything we have built together." But the magnate did not move. "My priority is my son," he answered firmly, releasing his arm in a movement that seemed to liberate not only himself, but also the construction of years of illusions and pain. The news exploded like a bomb. The wedding of the year, so desired, so carefully planned, was cancelled there before everyone. There were no more words, not even music. There was no music or flowers. The guests, stunned, hesitated between weak applause and disapproving looks. Some embarrassed, others escaping from the reflection that this family had shown to society. Victoria, who had dedicated her life to rehearsing false smiles, now only surrendered to tears of rage. The fairy tale had come to an end and not all the fortune in the world could fix her reputation after that scandal. The minister ended the ceremony in a tone that sounded like an apology. There was no desire for blessings or anything else. The altar that had started the day as a luxury showcase, which previously showed wealth, now served as a place of justice. Sarah, the nanny, received Michael in her arms with the sweetness of a mother, protecting him from flashes, comments and reproachful looks. The child felt the calm of someone who had emerged from a storm, but understood that from that moment he would have much to rebuild. Richard, for the first time in a long time, put his gaze on his son and without saying anything promised, with the intensity of an oath, never to fail again in that way. The journalist sought statements, but Richard ignored them all. His gaze was fixed only on Michael. And at that moment it became clear, his son's happiness was the only priority. Michael Rodriguez, the security guard, opened a path through the crowd and the family left without looking back, leaving the press only silence, which proved more expressive than any statement. Patricia Miller, the journalist, recorded what she could, but deep down understood that the center of the story was not in the scandal, but in redemption. The flowers withered. The bouquets fell apart, the red carpet lost its shine, the hall emptied, but what really remained marked in memory was the voice of justice that sounded in the cry of a child who had the courage to speak. In murmurs, people tried to understand how everything had changed so quickly. It was as if that relationship had never been real. Then the clear choice sounded. No fortune can equal a child's peace. No comfort can compete with truth. The altar that became a tribunal made clear that when love is false, there is no place for a happy ending. Victoria, now alone, became negative news. Her name was a topic repeated on social media, message groups, and local newspapers. However, what really caught everyone's attention was the certainty that under so much makeup hid a painful story marked by suffering, abuse, and cowardice. It was undeniable. No one dared to console the ex-fiancée. The shame was enormous, the defeat complete. And curiously, even those who had always envied her life, now only felt pity. The world finally understood that character is not measured by money, but by decisions and their results. The woman walked with her head high, and Michael's strength inspired those who before only watched. Now every adult there thought about their own attitudes. They remembered every time they had remained silent before injustice. The child's story became an important topic at the dinner table. It transformed into advice for daughters, into hope for those who still suffer in silence. The wedding cancellation became a symbol of resistance, of fighting, of self-love. From that day, no one looked at Michael with pity again. They looked at him with admiration. The truth is that everyone left that hall changed. What was supposed to be a normal party became a decisive moment, a lifelong learning. Michael demonstrated that, regardless of the size of your fear, courage lies in speaking even when you tremble. The altar, in the end, fulfilled its function. It did not build a false family, but liberated those who sought genuine love. And from that moment, the story of that house would never repeat itself. The father embraced his son strong and firm, as he had never done before. "Now it's just us two, Michael. We're going to start a new stage," he told him. The child, still fearful, felt he had finally found his true place. Victoria stayed behind. Carol disappeared among the guests, and Richard followed his path. With the commitment to care for what was important, the story took a new course, and everyone learned that happiness when based on truth never fades. However, while the hall emptied, the whole city wondered what would be the destiny of that family from that moment. The future was uncertain, full of challenges, but one certainty remained in everyone's memory. Courage, justice, and love conquer any display of luxury. And deep down, everyone hoped that Michael would finally have the opportunity to live a childhood full of dreams, free from fear, pain, and shame. When everything seemed finished, Richard Thompson made an unprecedented decision. He knelt before his son right there in the mansion hall. The magnate left his pride, put aside the mask, and with his gaze fixed on Michael's eyes asked for forgiveness. "Forgive me for not having realized. Forgive me for not having been the father you needed. I promise I'm going to learn to observe. I'm going to be with you for real." The words reached the child's heart, who until that moment had lived alone in the midst of silence and abandonment floating in the air. The emotion could be touched. It was no longer an act, it was redemption. Sarah, the nanny, cried with them and hugged Michael with affection. Richard turned to her and without hesitating thanked her. "I thank you for having been his protection, his refuge when I wasn't there. If you want, I wish you to be an official part of our family, caring for Michael, being an important part in our life." The invitation surprised everyone, but served as a guarantee that from that moment the house would stop being a place of suffering and would become a refuge. The story began to change. The rewriting was done with respect, care, and, above all, honesty. Dr. Green, the attorney, acted quickly, taking protective measures to ensure that Victoria and Carol did not approach Michael. He organized psychological follow-up, reinforced security in the house, notified the school, and contacted Child Protective Services. On that occasion there was no room for excuses. The process developed with discretion, without fanfare, but with the seriousness of those who recognize the value of each pain lived in that delicate moment. Michael for the first time had the sensation that someone accompanied him, not only with words, but with firm actions. The media sought a scandal, but only found closed doors. Patricia Miller tried, but Sarah responded in a low voice, "Today is not time for news, it's time to heal." A new cycle began, and this time without an audience, without flashes, without appearances. The silence that previously crushed him, now became protection. The home, previously adorned with portraits of appearance, now proudly displayed images of Michael's mother. The walls, which before remained bare, had been dressed with authentic memories, recovered recollections, stories that no one could hide or destroy anymore. Days passed and opulence lost relevance. Richard chose to change exhibitions for locks, busy schedule for presents, surface for tenderness, eliminating hollow celebrations. Meals recovered the echo of laughter. The home again exhaled fragrances of home cooking. Michael's bedroom was filled with drawings and entertainment without fear of deterioration. The child rediscovered the joy of play, regained faith, rest, and the ability to mention his mother without remorse. The device ceased to be a protection and transformed into an additional one. At that moment his voice reverberated without requiring documentation. Group therapy appointments were established as habit. Richard understood that rebuilding the bond demanded assistance, the obligation to relearn fatherhood. Michael found the capacity to manifest his emotions, to place trust in his father's embrace and to experience protection alongside Sarah. The damage did not vanish instantly, but gradually was replaced by positive experiences, new stories, and a reborn hope. What previously constituted public disgrace transformed into intimate recognition. Forgiveness did not eliminate the story, but cleared the path toward a different tomorrow. The repair surpassed the limits of the residence. Richard devoted himself to rehabilitating Michael's mother's reputation, to rescuing her narrative, to restoring the privileged position that had always belonged to her. The images returned to their locations, the reminiscences integrated into conversations, the narratives were exchanged without fear or torment. The child discovered his lineage, his story that had not emerged by chance. It had arisen from the affection of someone who, despite her absence, had imprinted a lasting trace of love. Sarah established herself as a reference. They constituted themselves as an authentic family. The dialogues between her and Richard now dealt with education, future and Michael's well-being. Everything transmuted into genuine, devoid of masks and commitments. The child perceived that finally his existence traveled the correct path. Trust erected itself as foundation, the dwelling as sanctuary. Sorrow yielded space to hope, terror to security. In this renewed context, Michael allowed himself to experience the childhood that years of torment had taken from him. Michael's story reverberated throughout the entire city. Numerous families re-examined their behaviors. Various children found their expression. His model became inspiration, warning, and moment of transformation. In educational centers, debates about abuse and consideration began to be addressed seriously. What was previously mystery became collective teaching, and in each place the maxim was reiterated: courage lies in expressing oneself, but justice in acting. And justice, impregnated with love, metamorphoses its entire environment. The painful past was never erased, but ceased to be prison. Michael assimilated that the mark is a sign of overcoming, not responsibility. His narrative established itself as an emblem of resistance. From adversity, hope of redemption flourished. The altar that previously symbolized affront transformed into an insignia of protection, and each dawn confirmed that no wound possesses sufficient strength to silence those who have courage to pursue justice, love, and dignity. 2 years have passed since that moment that reconfigured everything. The dwelling ceased to be theater of conflicts and suffering. Michael's laughter resonated through its corridors, evidencing that by cultivating love and consideration, happiness returns to cohabit with us. Birthdays were commemorated with modest cakes at home. Fullness, childish laughter, and that incomparable joy. Richard Thompson, now a truly present father, devoted himself to experiencing each moment. He prioritized afternoons in green spaces, drawing stuck to the refrigerator and mastering the preparation of rice with vegetables to Michael's taste, relegating lucrative meetings. The metamorphosis was not limited to routine, but penetrated his essence. With each brief excursion, each simple walk, each residential corner was filled with fresh memories. There was no room for past specters. Michael's mother's portraits now had location. She constituted the focus of attention in the main room. The child mentioned her with manifest pride, smiling when evoking the stories, and everyone understood it. Remembrance was no longer a source of torment, but a deep root, an invisible embrace. The renewed family was built from care, affection, and an authentic routine, without imposed excesses, without need to appear perfect before anyone. The love between Richard and Sarah germinated daily. Initially, camaraderie and complicity. Subsequently, admiration, respect, and even deeper connection. Love developed gradually, founded on minor daily decisions, dedication to Michael, and longing. The building of truth was gradual, without haste or impositions. The marriage proposal occurred simply in the home patio, before neighbors and genuine friends who longed for the couple's happiness. Without drones, without red carpet, only the sun, the patio flora, and a small table with cake, candy, and abundant pleasant conversations. On that special day, Michael, the 10-year-old child, was in charge of carrying the rings. With unique childish frankness, he took the microphone and expressed himself cordially. "I thank you for choosing my family daily. My joy is immense for having you as parents." The attendees were deeply moved. It was not merely a wedding ceremony, but celebration of existence, courage, and overcoming melancholy. Richard promised firmly, "I will honor your mother's memory, I will protect you and love Sarah with everything learned by your side." Sarah, in turn, declared, "I choose you today, tomorrow, and eternally. Our home will be refuge, never showcase." There was no controversy or news publication. The official statement omitted the polemic, emphasizing overcoming. The dignity of the message directed only to loved ones proclaimed, "The child is worth more than any event." The photo album abandoned forced poses and humiliating images, yielding space to moments of genuine affection, truthfulness, rebirth. In a consecrated corner, a small altar with reminiscences of Michael's mother, now restored, venerated and celebrated as essential elements of this narrative. Michael's childhood established itself as paradigm. The educational institution considered him an example of courage, overcoming and resistance. Friends visited the dwelling, experienced comfort. Welcomed, they discovered the authentic meaning of sincerity. Adults began to respect his perspective, listen to his emotions and value his voice. The child previously ignored transformed into a symbol of hope. What happened previously metamorphosed into a path toward the future. The marks of suffering were substituted by scars of victory. Tears gave way to radiant smile, and with each embrace the family perceived they were rebuilding the apparently impossible. The sacred site, which previously had been scene of judgments, transformed into safe and permanent refuge, there among discreet flowers and hopes. Richard, Sarah and Michael honestly sealed a pact of truthfulness. The city, which before only debated what had occurred, now celebrated overcoming. The young one established himself as example, the father as model, the caregiver as cordial mother, and the message was clear. Love, justice and courage transform any suffering into new opportunity for happiness. Everyone assimilated the lesson. No one is obligated to carry past burdens, but can choose to build a meaningful present. Existence continued with its inevitable joys and sorrows, but no longer with fear of facing what the future held. Michael finally found his expression, his territory, and his welcome. Richard pursued each lost dream of his child, helping him recover joy and mastering the art of being authentically present. Sarah metamorphosed the residence into a genuine home, devoid of false appearances or need to satisfy others, with the sole commitment to protect. Tomorrow presented itself clear, but no one could deny the certainty that they finally constituted a true family. And when the city commented about that union, the center no longer lay in scandal, but in reconstruction, in love that protects authentic people who learn to love again. The child who manifested himself at the altar transformed everyone's existence, teaching courage, forgiveness, and how to convert even the deepest torment into opportunity to restart. The message was established clearly. Family is truly built in the everyday, in attention, in affection, in consideration, and never in facades. The circle was completed. The question, "Speak now or forever hold your peace," finally obtained an answer. And to everyone's amazement, it was not through silence or resentment. It began with a voice, with a narrative, with a new beginning. Michael, Richard, and Sarah traveled the path together, evidencing that authentic love transcends the past, using it as fuel to reach new horizons. The altar, previously theater of suffering, transformed into emblem of victory, overcoming, and a future where no one else needs to hide. Existence occasionally presents surprises. What begins as tragedy can culminate in invaluable teachings, impossible to acquire with wealth. When examining retrospectively the challenges faced by Michael, Richard, and Sarah, we understand that courage does not reside in the absence of fear, but in the resolution not to remain silent before injustice. Numerous families experience similar realities, marked by silence and pain repressed by fear or embarrassment. How many adults delay in recognizing their children's suffering, believing difficulties will resolve spontaneously? It is easier to dismiss the situation, simulate everything is going well, but true change arises when someone decides to break that cycle, as Michael did. Have you ever possessed the strength to express the truth that needed to be pronounced, even if it was difficult? This family story serves as a reminder that repair is not limited only to inspiring words, but to actions that demonstrate no one is unreachable in the search to transform their own destiny. And that each of us, upon receiving a call for help, possesses the responsibility not to show indifference. What constitutes the limit of our commitment to those we love? What price are we willing to pay to protect those who require it? Sometimes the simple act of listening, of requesting forgiveness, of being present has greater impact than any material wealth. Perhaps you also know someone who faces difficulties in secret, and the present challenge lies in determining if you are prepared to be the absent voice, the force that transforms everything. If this narrative has impacted you, induced you to reflect, or shown you a new perspective on existence, do not wait to act. Subscribe to the channel, share this story with those who need to hear it, and leave a comment if you can relate. Activate notifications so you never miss a new story. There is always a powerful narrative awaiting you. And attention, there is already another special video waiting for you on the screen. Don't waste time, click and embark with us on this journey of introspection, transformation and hope. I express my enormous gratitude for your presence until this moment. May you always stand against injustice. Until next time.